Have you ever been in the middle of a conversation and felt it? That quiet distance. That sense that everyone around you is talking about one thing, and your mind is already 3 layers deeper, somewhere else entirely. Somewhere you can't quite explain and wouldn't know how to bring them. You don't say anything. You nod. You smile at the right moments. But inside, you feel it again. That familiar gap between the world you see and the world everyone else seems to be living in. Most people, when they feel this, assume something is wrong with them. Carl Jung believed the opposite. Jung spent his entire life mapping the human mind, its shadows, its symbols, its hidden architecture. And what he found, again and again, was that the people who felt most out of place in ordinary conversations were often the ones whose minds were operating on a completely different level of reality. Not better, not superior. Different in a way that is both a gift and a burden. Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming fully yourself, separate from the collective, separate from what the group thinks and feels and demands. And he was clear. Very few people ever truly begin this process. Most spend their entire lives thinking the thoughts the world gave them, feeling the feelings the world approved, and never once asking whether any of it was really theirs. But some people, and if you're watching this, you may be one of them, can't help but ask. They have always asked. And that asking changes everything about how they move through the world. Here are 7 signs that your mind works differently than almost everyone around you, drawn from the depths of Jungian psychology and what they really mean. The first sign is that you feel emotions that don't have names. Most people experience emotions in the categories the world gave them. Happy, sad, angry, anxious. They feel something, they label it, and they move on. But you have always noticed something more complicated happening inside you. Feelings that arrive layered, grief mixed with gratitude, love that feels like loss, nostalgia for something you've never experienced, a heaviness during beautiful moments, a strange lightness during dark ones. You try to describe these things to people and watch their faces carefully, and you can see the moment they stop understanding. They offer you a simple word. You take it because it's easier, but you know it doesn't fit. Jung wrote extensively about what he called the feeling function. Not emotion as a reaction, but emotion as a form of intelligence. A way of knowing the world that is just as rigorous as logic, but operates through a completely different channel. People with a highly developed feeling function in the Jungian sense do not feel more than others in a dramatic or sentimental way. They feel more precisely. They can detect the emotional temperature of a room before anyone has spoken. They know when something is wrong between 2 people who are acting as though everything is fine. They can hold contradictory feelings simultaneously without needing to resolve them into something simpler. This is not weakness. In Jungian terms, this is a form of perception. And like all forms of perception, it gives you access to information that others simply cannot see. The cost is that the world rarely makes space for this kind of complexity, and so you learn early to carry it quietly. The second sign is that you have always been drawn to meaning more than to comfort. Think back across your life. When you had a choice, not always a conscious one, between the path that was easy and familiar and the path that seemed to lead somewhere more true, more real, more yours, which one pulled at you? Most people choose comfort, not because they are weak, but because the nervous system is designed to seek safety, and safety feels like sameness. But there is a type of person who finds a particular kind of discomfort in staying still, who feels something close to claustrophobia when life becomes too predictable, too agreed upon, too settled. Jung described this as the call of the self, capital S, the Jungian self, which is not the ego, not the personality, but the deep organizing center of who you truly are. And the self, unlike the ego, is not interested in comfort. It is interested in wholeness. And wholeness requires moving into the parts of yourself that are still dark, still unknown, still unintegrated. This is why people who think differently often make choices that baffle the people around them. They leave secure jobs for uncertain callings. They end relationships that look fine from the outside. They start over at ages when starting over is supposed to be finished. They follow something that they cannot fully explain, only that ignoring it feels like a kind of dying. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And the person drawn to meaning over comfort is, in some deep sense, always moving toward that acceptance, even when it costs them everything the world said they should want. The third sign is that you find most small talk genuinely exhausting. Not because you are antisocial, not because you don't care about people, but because something in you requires depth as a basic condition of connection. And when depth is absent, the interaction costs you more than it gives you. You sit at parties and watch people discuss things that feel to you like the surface of the surface. You participate. You perform the social ritual with enough fluency that most people don't notice. But afterward, you go home tired in a specific way. Not physically tired, but hollowed out, as though you spent 2 hours speaking a language that wasn't your own. Jung identified two fundamental orientations of human energy: introversion and extroversion. And he was careful to say that neither is a personality quirk. They are fundamentally different ways of relating to the world. The extrovert is energized by external engagement. The introvert is energized by internal engagement and depleted by too much external demand. But beyond introversion, there is something else happening in people who think differently. It is not just that they need solitude to recharge. It is that they have a very specific hunger for a kind of conversation that most social environments never produce. They want to talk about what things mean, what people actually feel beneath what they say they feel, what is true and what is performed, what they are afraid of, what they dream, what they wonder about at 2 a.m. when the noise of the day has gone quiet. When they find someone who can go there, really go there, they come alive in a way that surprises even them. The exhaustion lifts, time disappears. They feel, for a while, like they are finally speaking their native language. These conversations are rare, which is why people who think differently often feel, despite being surrounded by others, profoundly alone. The fourth sign is that you process the world in symbols, patterns, and metaphors. You have probably always done this, maybe so automatically that you didn't know it was unusual. When something happens to you, you don't just experience the event. You immediately start to find its shape, its pattern, what it reminds you of, what it might mean beyond its surface. You think in comparisons. This situation is like that story. This person reminds you of that archetype.
This moment has the structure of something much larger. Jung spent decades studying what he called the collective unconscious, the deep layer of the human psyche that is shared across all people, across all cultures, across all of history.
And what he found there were archetypes, recurring patterns, figures, and symbols that appear in dreams, in myths, in art, in religion. The hero, the shadow, the great mother, the wise old man. Jung believed that people who are more connected to this deeper layer of the psyche naturally think in archetypal and symbolic terms. They cannot help it. A relationship is also a myth. A career choice is also a quest. A personal failure is also a death and a potential resurrection. This way of thinking is extraordinarily creative. It is the source of great literature, great art, great philosophy. It is also the reason that people who think this way can feel permanently misunderstood, because they are always talking about two things at once, and most people only hear one of them. If you have ever tried to explain something that felt deeply important to you, and watched the other person understand only the literal surface of what you said, you know exactly what this feels like. The fifth sign is that you have a difficult relationship with authority that has nothing to do with rebellion. You don't distrust authority because you want to break rules. You distrust it because you have a very finely tuned sensitivity to authenticity, and authority that is not grounded in genuine wisdom or genuine care reads as hollow to you almost immediately. You can feel the difference between someone who leads because they have actually earned that position through depth and integrity, and someone who leads because they know how to perform leadership. Between a rule that exists because it serves something real and a rule that exists because someone needed to feel in control. Most people don't make this distinction consciously. They follow the form of authority, the title, the status, the uniform, without questioning what is behind it. Not because they are naive, but because the nervous system is designed to find safety in hierarchy. But you have never been able to fully do this. Something in you insists on looking behind the form at the substance. And when the substance isn't there, you cannot pretend that it is, even when pretending would be easier, safer, more socially acceptable. Jung described this as the process of confronting the persona, the social mask that individuals and institutions wear. The person who thinks differently has an unusually low tolerance for persona. They see through masks quickly, and they find it genuinely difficult to maintain their own. This makes them honest in ways that can be uncomfortable for others, and it makes them resistant in ways that can be mistaken for arrogance, or immaturity, or difficulty. But it is not any of these things. It is integrity, operating at a level most people never reach. The sixth sign is that your dreams are vivid, strange, and feel significant. Not everyone remembers their dreams. Not everyone experiences them as anything more than random noise, the brain clearing its cache. But for people who think differently, dreams arrive like messages, dense with imagery, full of figures and places and emotional tones that feel realer sometimes than waking life. And even when the dream is strange or disturbing, there is a sense that it matters, that it is trying to show you something. Jung considered dreams the primary language of the unconscious, the way the deeper mind communicates with the conscious self. He spent an enormous part of his career analyzing dreams, his own and those of his patients, and what he found was that the unconscious is not random, it is purposeful. It compensates for what the conscious mind ignores. It brings forward what the ego pushes away. It speaks in symbols because symbols can hold complexity that language cannot. The person who is naturally more connected to their unconscious, who thinks symbolically, who processes deeply, who feels the world in layers,
tends to have a more active and more communicative dream life.
The unconscious finds them more accessible. This can be disorienting. The boundary between inner and outer life feels thinner for these people. They carry their dream world into their days. They see their waking life reflected in their night mind. They know things about themselves that they couldn't have reasoned their way to. They dreamed their way there instead. Most people find this hard to relate to, and so this, too, becomes something carried quietly, alone, in the private interior of a mind that never fully stops working. The seventh sign is that you have always felt, on some level, that you were here for something, without being able to explain what it is. Not in an arrogant sense, not as a belief that you are special or chosen, but as a quiet, persistent sense of purpose that has followed you through your entire life, even in the periods when everything external was going wrong. A sense that your story has a shape, that your experiences, even the painful ones, are leading somewhere, that there is a thread running through everything, and your job is to find it and follow it and not betray it. Jung called this the teleological pull of the self, the idea that the psyche is oriented not just by its past, by its wounds and its conditioning, but by its future, by what it is becoming, by what it is meant to integrate and express. Most psychological frameworks look backward, at trauma, at childhood, at what broke you. Jung looked forward. He believed the human psyche has an inherent direction, that the symptoms and struggles of a person's life are often not just echoes of what happened to them, but signals from the deeper self about what still needs to happen. The person who thinks differently has always felt this forward pull. They don't know where it leads. They can't always justify it rationally, but they feel it, especially in the moments when they have ignored it, and they have settled, and they have chosen safety over truth. In those moments, something in them goes quiet and gray, and they know, without being able to say why, that they have moved away from the thread, and they know they will have to find their way back. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who your parents needed you to be, not who your culture approved of, not the version of yourself that made everyone comfortable. Who you actually are. This is the work of a lifetime, and it is work that most people never begin, not because they lack the capacity, but because it requires a willingness to be different that takes more courage than most people know they have." If you recognized yourself in these 7 signs, in the layered emotions, in the hunger for meaning, in the exhaustion of surfaces, in the symbolic mind, in the distrust of hollow authority, in the vivid dream life, in the quiet sense of purpose that has followed you everywhere, then you already know something important. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not lost. You are in the middle of a process that Carl Jung spent his entire life trying to map and name and honor. The process of becoming fully, completely, irreducibly yourself. It is uncomfortable. It is often lonely. It asks things of you that easier paths do not. But it also gives you something that no other path can. A life that is actually yours. And at the end of it, not a life you survived or performed or got through, but a life you meant. If you're watching this to the end, it means you think differently, more deeply. This is a place for those who seek understanding beyond the obvious. Subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. I want to know how you see the world.